Welcome back to this live for Transitioning Humanitarians series with Viki and myself. Hi, Viki.
Hi, Asel. Hello, everyone.
Yes, so sorry that we haven't been on live with you, mainly because I've been traveling, so that's why we needed to postpone. But we are here back and we want to continue the topic of designing our lives intentionally the way we want to live it. And one of the topics that we thought of talking today is the topic of controlling and how that's getting in the way of living the life to the fullest, the way that exactly we want to. And I just wanted to highlight how I see this often in the subtlest ways that we have been doing it. And in case you don't notice it, you can start noticing it now. And then, of course, we would be giving you also ways of how and what not to do and what to do where you can't control in case you are not really aware of it of yourself or you want to just fill the picture of how you see it, right? So the way that I was thinking about or observing from my clients and myself as well is that I see in main three areas that we are controlling, even though we believe that we don't control, I think, but somehow it comes naturally and it's like a human thing to do. So one of the ways is that we tend to control emotions of other people, right? So in other words, how someone feels about us, how someone don't feel about us. This is what we want to somehow control, even though we don't intend, I think, but somehow like subtly this come up. So was one of the examples could be that we don't want to offend someone, therefore we don't say things that we want to really say, or we want to have a good reputation and therefore we don't say no to things maybe when we want to actually say things because we're afraid that they other people's emotions will like influence our reputation or how they see us. So therefore, this is like the major area that I see we end up wanting to control when we know that we can't really do that. The second area that I see where we're not really like doing much, but we could be, is the area where we could be intentionally designing, intentionally doing things the way we want to, but because of so much fear of certain uncertainties, certain things, and therefore we don't really try to control it or try to do things within our power. If you don't like the word control, you can replace it with um, what is basically what you can do and cannot do, right? So this is really what we're talking about. So therefore, I see where we're not really doing enough, or we could be doing a lot, is where um, how we can actually create the things or do the things that we want to, and we have all the tools for doing it, and we're not really working on that, and therefore our like designing our lives the way we want to is not happening the way we want to. And the third area, it's very linked to the second and first, which is trying to control the uncertainty. And I think there we are like, it's a very human thing to do. We all want to be feeling safe. We all want to have stability, right? We all want to have something to hold on to feel belonging, to feel useful. And this is a very human thing to do. And therefore, we often have this belief that we are able to control the uncertainty, or we should be. And if we don't, then we're not going for it, basically, right? So the example that I can give you, a very specific one, which is that let's say that we want to change jobs and we want to go for something totally different or something even like a next duty station, but there's a lot of uncertainty involved with it, right? So therefore we do a lot of things of like trying to find out who works there and how the conditions are and whether we'll be safe and all of these things, right? Now I'm not suggesting that this is a bad thing or a good thing. I'm just suggesting that because we are so evolutionary, like from evolution trained to do that, is because of which we tend to want to have certain guarantees that things will work out. And as soon as we don't have those guarantees, then we are like, no, 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 we're not doing it because it's too risky, right? So we label it as too uncertain, and therefore we don't want to go for it. So therefore you can see that the way that we try to control the uncertainty is by either coming up with a lot of reasons why it won't work and then
Mhm.
we just don't go for it, or we just keep wanting to have a lot of these guarantees and therefore we don't end up creating the life we want to. So this is, I just wanted to bring your awareness to how these are the three ways at least I see subtly, unconsciously, maybe a lot of the times we try to control when we know that we can't do that. So what would you say, Viki, to that?
Well, yeah, thank you for this explanation. You know what? Like when I'm thinking about the situation of control, or when people want to control, I think, as you say very correctly, it's in when we want to control to make us feel safe because
Yeah,
we think we are going to get some results by controlling it. So very
yeah,
often, as you mentioned, these things for many people are subconscious. It's a modus operandi, it's the way we
hmm,
operate,
hmm,
that we when we feel some uncertainty in areas we don't know, that we somehow
yeah,
start extending, I would say almost extending like additional hands that we need to control,
yeah,
and we start control items, we start controlling people, we start controlling agendas and loads
yeah,
of different things in order to feel safe, in order to have a presumed control over the events.
yeah,
But here, one of the very important things that I usually work with people, that have the issue of control, because not everyone has it significant. And I mean, I have one of these issues that sometimes I really extend in the situation of stress and duress, when I say, okay, I need to control. So again, quite a few people have this, and this is again a reaction, as you say, that developed in childhood. But what I suggest to look at it is really to take a look and say, what are the things within my control and what are the things outside of my control. And I think this is probably the primary and most important sort of a thought at the beginning, or question to ask oneself, because very often from what I'm seeing with the clients, there is a big picture, a lot of things in place, and people start concentrating on the things they can't control, that are outside of their control. So when, for example, they say, let's say I don't know, my boss is so and so, or there is this and this dynamic in the team that I can't change. So very often the attention or the focus is on the impossibility of the big task, like how do I control this, as opposed to really breaking it down into smaller pieces and looking at it. Okay, so what are the things that are within your control? Your reaction, for example, that's one of the first things we can work on, our own reaction to this situation, because of course these can very often trigger high anxiety. The need, this stress and the need to control can trigger high anxiety. So our reaction, and many other things, many other smaller things that we can control in this usually larger issue that we are facing. So maybe at this stage I would mention this question to ask oneself: what are the things that you can control, or what are the things that are outside of your control?
yeah.
um,
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to also bring to the awareness of when we are in very reactive mode, I find it is difficult to also know what is within our control and what is not, because we are reacting in those moments, right? So some of the examples is, for instance, that we are very judgmental of certain issues or certain people or ourselves. Then we may not be able to really see where it's our control, where it's not, because we just want to like solve the issue or remove the person or remove this issue, and therefore we feel like everything will go back to normal and back to good in quotes, right? So that's why I would suggest that if you are trying to really understand yourself in terms of what is within your control and what's not, I would love for you to suggest to like coming to this place of feeling safe, feeling grounded for some people, they say, right? Or feeling like in peace with yourself. or having some type of like calm mind for you then to start looking at, okay, what is it that I'm trying to achieve, like Viki was saying, what is it that I'm going for? What is it that is actually that I can do something about it? What is it that I cannot do something about it? And what do I want to do with that? Right. So that's always, I think, within our purview that we can do something about it. So that's why, like Vicky was saying, is the reaction that we have or the way that we interpret, the way we solve it, it's all within our control from what we can do in that environment. The other thing that I wanted to bring your attention to is when we are trying to control is that what's that signaling really is that we are in that moment not trusting whatever the emotion,
Mhm.
or another way of looking at it, maybe is helpful, is that we're trying to protect ourselves in some way, right? So we're trying to protect ourselves from feeling hurt, feeling disappointed, feeling frustrated, feeling offended, feeling not belonging, whatever it is that we're trying to protect ourselves from. And hence, we're trying to control the environment, trying to control other people, trying to control that system, whatever it is, right? And that's very understandable if you think about it from the brain's perspective, because our brains are meant to primarily protect us and feel us safe, right? That's a good thing. And I think that's something that we shouldn't really like rebel against it. I have learned to be friends with my brain in so many ways. And one of them is understanding is when I'm really being protective of myself,
Mhm.
of how I don't want to feel certain things. And that's a very normal human reaction. And therefore, what I've learned from my own experience is that, okay, when I try to control other people or their emotions, or when I try to protect myself from certain emotions, right, then I know is in those moments is that I'm not feeling safe, right? So whatever reason, I'm not feeling safe, I'm feeling maybe defensive, I'm feeling overly explanatory, or maybe I'm feeling like attacking, right? So in those moments, I know that this is when I'm not feeling safe. So then I need to learn for myself is, okay, what can I do for myself in that moment that I can take care of myself better, or I can calm myself, or I can get to my like ground energy or balance energy, whichever the way that you interpret for yourself, so that you can then say, okay, controlling someone else's emotion does not work. We know it. Controlling my emotion in that moment probably will not work it either because I'm very in the reactionary mode.
Mhm.
So, therefore, the best I can do is calm myself and then again decide how I want to react to that, or decide what to do about it, decide whether to react to it as well, right? So these are the things that are all options. But I really want you to like think about control signals that come up. If you notice them, they might be just an indication of you lacking certain emotion that you otherwise would have, or it's a signal of you um, bringing trust more to yourself and say, okay, what do you want to do in that moment? And what I love about this exercise is that then like controlling does not become something like of a problem that we need to solve or we need to get rid of, or like, some people tend to then get into their all like digging inside and finding all the things to fix and whatever, not right, but instead just understanding, okay, oh, what am I being protective of, or how my brain wants to protect me from something, and what do I want to do in that moment, and it becomes more like a very easy to solve things.
Mhm.
What would you say, Vicky?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm also thinking in particular for our topic for the transitioning humanitarians, and what happens. What sometimes I see happening is that in this in this fear, in this anxiety that people feel that they want to be transitioning, but of course it's for many this is stressful. This there is some anxiety. People sort of overly control the process and go
Yeah,
for the very safe option.
yeah,
Again, there is nothing wrong with that. It's just important to be aware that if you
yeah,
don't give yourself the space of being out of control, so to speak, or realizing, okay, this is what I can control and this is beyond my control. And let's just try to go to those spaces that are outside of my control in the attempt of going for what I really want, what I
Yeah.
decided that I want. Here, I would like to really bring attention to people that these are the moments that can be stressful. So really be aware of what you can control, what is outside of your control, and again, go to those spaces to explore what is possible for you. Because if again we choose out of this need to control the really really safe option, it might be
Yes.
at everything we control. When we control it, the solution is good on a short term, but on a mid and long term, it's not going to be something useful for you, good for you, something that you is in your, you know, the wish for your highest being, I would say.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a very good point. And I also wanted to mention one of the reasons why controlling is something that we want to look at it as to how we are controlling it
Mhm.
currently, right? And how are the ways that we're actually maybe not doing enough where we could be doing enough is exactly that, is that we end up spending a lot of time and energy and mental space on trying to control the external circumstances. So some of the ways that we do it, like trying to control perception of others about ourselves, right? Or I don't know, judging other people before how they're not the way that we think they should be, and all of these things. And then we have no time left to be actually working on how do we really deal with those uncertainties,
Yeah.
right? Because those uncertainties in transitioning are very inevitable, and that's just part of the process. Just like when we started our humanitarian journey as well, right? So there were so many uncertainties, but because we had so much passion, so much love for what we wanted to do, we just went ahead and did all the things. For many of us, the stories that we know, right? So that's why we probably didn't really think much in terms of, oh my God, will this go right? Or am I going to get what I want? We probably didn't think much about those things because also maybe the career stages were different. But now that we have a lot of experience, obviously we want to be thinking about a lot of things. And that's very good that we think about it. But Vicky amazingly mentioned is that we end up often going for the safest option because our brain is again afraid of not having control over so many things, right? So therefore, we end up sacrificing or compromising
Mhm.
our desires for wanting really maybe something else. And therefore, the best way that you can spend your energy, according to my experience, is that spend your energy on how you can actually increase your inner safety creating mechanisms so that you don't actually are worried so much about the external uncertainties that come your way. And one of the ways that you can create that safety is learning that you know or you can handle any emotions that come your way. That's one of the ways you can create safety, right? Because your brain will be saying, okay, I know there will be disappointments and other things along the way, but I know what to do with them and how to handle them instead of avoiding them, right? So therefore, that will be one of the ways. Another way is just the way you create safety outside, like buying homes or creating contractual jobs or whatever the safeties that you create outside, you can equally create those within yourself. And the way that you can do that is like seeing what are your current opinions about yourself, about your abilities. And if your opinions are so down to, I can't do anything, I'm not useful, or whatever the things that you keep telling yourself, then probably you will end up going for the safest option because your brain believes you're not really able to handle those things that you really want to go for, right? Because your brain will be telling it's too risky, or there is no guarantee, or it may not work out the way you want to. So you may as well go for what you know how to do and how to deal with. And in those moments, those type of like dealing with emotions, knowing your abilities come so much in handy. So then you can trust yourself to be able to handle whatever comes in your way to go to what you want to. So that's why I would rather for you to spend so much more time and energy on building those like internal mechanisms of safety instead of trying to control the outside world, which
Yeah.
we all know cannot do.
Yeah, yeah, that's a super important concept that you mentioned, the concept of inner safety, the concept
Yeah,
of really feeling safe, and how to build these, how to build
yeah,
this feeling, this mental. It's a feeling, but it's also a thought, as you mentioned. And I think this, both of them are super important to try to build, and really be aware of any sort of negative thinking patterns we have, and positive intelligence, we call it, sort of inner saboteurs, or like, so self-sabotaging thoughts, as you mentioned, that you may have. And these are, you usually, for controller, I mean, if we have this control, a tendency to control, it's very often same kind of a sentence that comes up and repeats itself. So it's really important to be aware and to sort of catch yourself, because you can spend actually hours, and maybe sometimes even days, in this negative mind pattern that, as you say, will then bring you down, because you will keep on repeating yourself, I can't do this, I'm not good enough, and like, all these things that are really not helpful and are actually not even true. It is just sort of a mechanism that has developed, usually early in the childhood, that sort of is perpetuated in situations of adulthood when it's no longer needed. So
yeah,
that's why we really wanted to really mention a tool of how to do that, how to catch yourself
yeah,
and develop really, not, I mean, for some people, affirmations, positive affirmations work, not necessarily my cup of tea in my experience, but maybe that can work for someone. But really to gain this inner feeling of safety, because once you have that, you will not have a need to control, as you mentioned, the external environment.
yeah. So I also find that, so the way that I think about like internal safety mechanism, I'm calling it, I don't know, maybe
That's a good
there are
word.
other terms, maybe there are other terms that you may want to use, but the way I really see it is that there are certain feelings that just like define who you are in some ways, and then they become like your identity, right? So for instance, some of our identities might be that we are good at emergencies, right? Some of our identities might be that we're not really good at it, but we're good at structural way of doing
Yeah.
things. Some of us are have the identity of being courageous, or
Mhm.
others may have the identity of flexible and good at surviving, whatever it is, right? So you can see that there are a lot of like certain emotions that describe what we're capable of or what we're not capable of, and we know those description of ourselves most of the time. Some of us maybe say that, oh, we're not good at failing, right? Others may say that we're good at failing and then we're getting up. So that's why I really see that whatever the opinions about ourselves and how we handle those emotions are so powerful tools to create that safety, that we can actually build that within ourselves, so that whatever the obstacles that come up, we know what to do, or we will figure out, or we believe that we will at least get over it at some point. So therefore, it will not become something so huge that we can't handle it, right? So that has been at least my experience of always knowing that, yes, I know that there will be a lot of difficulties on the way, but I rather work on them and get over them and feel like more stronger afterwards, instead of keep like indulging in my, oh my god, I didn't really do what I wanted to do, and here I am and my life sucks and da 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 da, right? And I didn't really want to go through those stories, because I felt like I have done that already so many times. I know how those stories go, and because of knowing how that story goes, I just chose that, okay, from now on, if I'm going to work on something, it better be something that I'm really uh, believing and passionate about, that I really want to do something about it, instead of just like feeling safe and compromising, because I know that even by compromising and feeling safe, I know that that's not going to really make me feel satisfied, like Viki
Mhm.
was saying, right? Maybe in the moment it will feel like, oh my God, it's a relief. I don't feel
Yeah.
scared anymore. But then after a while, you start questioning whether this was really a choice. But sometimes people use those immediate relief also as a way to like rest and recuperate, right? You can also do that and then go for a
Yeah.
long term different solutions as
Yeah.
well, or different ways of transitioning. That's always a possibility. But we just want you to think about how those like natural controlling mechanisms that we all have, I think, from nature, right? They are one natural meaning that comes with our human experience,
Mhm.
and recognizing what they are, in what subtle ways they're showing up in our lives, in how they are influencing our choices of how we want to live our lives, and noticing, understanding them may help us then say, okay, this is how I'm being currently governed by those fear and other natural mechanisms,
Mhm.
and if I don't want to do that, then here are the ways that I want to work towards getting to my goal, instead of just giving into um, less of an ideal option that we would like.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think what I also wanted to mention is that in when we are talking about transition, it's really important to just realize that there will be, as you mentioned, areas or times or moments when we will be out of control, where we will feel out of control. So
Yeah.
really, to I would say I don't want to. I'm struggling to say whether to start making yourself comfortable in this feeling of not being in control, or just
Mm,
being in that moment, because there are always situations in life when you are really out of control. Of course, there are different degrees of being out of control. There is something little bit, and then there is that, but you can also can be in a situation where you are completely, swimming, so to speak. So obviously there are degrees, and it's not to don't put yourself in a position of being completely stricken by anxiety, but again, just be aware that there are, during transitions or even building your ideal life in designing, there'll be moments that are not comfortable. There'll be moments where things will not be in 100% in your control.
yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking the other day is, at least my experience is that life seems to want us not to know what's going to happen, right? That's like I don't know. This is how life works. And we may plan and plan and have all the things in place. And then, of course, life surprises us with something else. And that's like, it has always been my experience. Things never seem to go the way that I thought it would go, which is also part of not controlling in a way, right? So not controlling life in that sense of saying, okay, it has to go as the way I want to, and if it doesn't, then things go wrong, and then I will. I don't know. My like scary story always is I end up on the streets, and then this is how my brain always says to me, right? But I also know and trust that I don't need to control how life is, basically. I can only do so much from my side of what I know best to do in those moments. And then try not to freak out when life gives me surprises that I don't like.
Yeah.
Now, whether I will manage all the time, experience shows not all the time, and that's okay too. And I think just giving ourselves this grace to say that there are a lot of things that we can do within our control. There are also a lot of things that we don't know and we will never know. And that's also maybe a beauty of life, and it's okay that way too. But I think what has been always helpful for me to know that whatever life throws at me that I don't like, let's say, knowing that I will be fine and I will be going through that, I think is so much comforting, and not like getting into so much low in the bottom of, I don't know, earth,
Yeah.
and then difficult to get out of it, right? And I think that my experience has been that, like, not going so deep I think was my biggest gain, I would say. And instead, always knowing and trusting that, yes, I know how to get out of it, or I will figure something out. Um, and I don't necessarily need to know all the things, but I can always do all the things that I know how to do best
Yeah.
to get to where I want to. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, anything else we want to mention on this controlling
I
thing?
think, you mentioned, you summarized it very nicely, and just maybe one thing to add is, as you say, is that we'll always find a way, and but staying in negative emotion for extended period of time is not helpful for anyone. It's not helpful to you as an individual. It's not helpful for people around. So the easier, the quicker we might get ourselves realize the negative mind pattern or the controlling mind pattern, the quicker we realize that this is hijacking our lives, the better. Really staying in the negative emotion for long is just not helpful. It is a good indicator that something needs to be adjusted, but it's not going to solve the problem. So maybe just that.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think if you're looking for like the opposite emotions to replace it with, right? So you can always think about, so one of my go-to emotions is like, how can I free myself, or how can I allow myself
Yeah.
to just not be in charge or in control? And I think that always helps me like release it, right? Let it go. I think that's always something you can use. The other one that I always go to is, how can I trust myself more in this moment, or trust life, or trust this person, trust the situation. It doesn't mean that I don't do much, but I will do it from that
Yeah.
trust rather than from, oh my God, I have to get it my way
Mhm.
in this terms kind of way, right? So that's why you can like experiment with yourself as to what is it that you can go to in those moments to counteract that controlling energy. Okay, so I think we have said enough about controlling. So, in case you have any questions, you're not unclear, or you want to get specific about certain things, come coach with us, and we'd love to coach you on this topic or any other topics that we've been covering. And yeah, we wish you a great transitioning with knowing where you're controlling and where you don't want to be controlling. And I think that's always helpful to move the needle faster. So we will see each other, or see you all next week. And until then, thank you, Vika. Viki.
That's okay. Thank you, Asel. See you next week.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.